Welcome back to another edition of Political Breakfast. We are so glad that you're here. This is our double dose this week. Brian Robinson, our Republican strategist, is here. And guesting this week is Saba, Executive Director of the Atlanta Civic Circle, in for Theron Johnson. Always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for stopping in.
Yeah.
Great to be with you all.
Good to have you, Saba.
Yeah, we were chatting before we started the show about Trump and some of his actions, and they're almost hard to keep up with because, you know, every time you turn around, there's something new on the news that's taking place. One of the latest is that the president has shuttered communications from federal health agencies, including the Atlanta-based Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And I was like, wow, you know, what's the focus there? Why so quickly? And, you know, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? So can we jump off from there?
People might be surprised to hear this, but I listened to a fair amount of Steve Bannon's podcast. So what I have seen from the Trump administration is no surprise. If you listen to Steve Bannon, you've already heard this playbook, right? And I think what this second Trump administration is going to focus on is a bit of shock and awe and something what they call flood the zone. And so we are going to do so much so fast that you can't wrap your head around it. And it's like whack-a-mole, but on steroids, right?
Yeah.
This happens and that happens and that happens. And it's really hard to focus and it's really hard to figure out what to do, right? So if you think about this from a military strategy, it makes perfect sense to bring this into the political strategy. And so it's caught folks flat-footed. Even some of his supporters, I think, have been surprised. And it's about identifying as many wins as possible, right? Like they know they're not going to be able to achieve everything on the agenda, but given this pace of work, they're going to have some big wins. And things like shutting down CDC communication is a big win within certain Republican circles. Because most could objectively say the CDC did not do a good job on communications with respect to COVID, nor did the World Health Organization. I think it's fair to say that. Now, that doesn't mean that they were wrong in everything, but there were some aspects that were absolutely wrong now that we've had, you know, the benefit of time. And so when you've got vaccinations on the chopping block with RFK as head of health services, when you've got folks feeling like the government did too much overreach on things like COVID, I'm not at all surprised to see what they're doing with the CDC. And this is just, we're not even at the tipping point, right? We're only a week and a half in. And so you think about 100 days of this pace and what we're going to see over a 100-day period.
Yeah, I was going to say you're walking in the halls of the office in Clifton over there at the CDC, and I don't know what kind of conversations do you envision taking place, you know, on this day regarding this move?
Well, I doubt internally that there is a broad understanding, at least not spoken out loud, about how we got to this spot. I appreciate what Saba said about the 2020 vision on what happened in 2020. I've never thought of it that way. Did you see what I did there? And I think we do look back now and go, everything wasn't perfect. And here's where Republicans come in with their viewpoints, is they weren't right on everything, which I have grace about. I can't expect them to know everything immediately about a new virus. I'm sure there's a learning curve. But what Republicans resent is that if you didn't agree with what CDC and other public health agencies were saying, you were censored and shut up on social media. You were seen as a troglodyte, backwards, as a threat to public health. And a lot of the stuff that people on the right were saying turned out to be right. And it's a mixed bag on both sides about who was right about what. But people on the right who questioned mask mandates, for example, people who on the right who questioned the wisdom of keeping schools closed. Y'all heard me in 2020 and 2021 going, put those kids back in school. This is insane. And I was right. And the right was right. Those kids, particularly the low-income kids who weren't getting support at home because the family simply can't provide it because they've got to go make money and put food on the table, those kids may never close that gap. The left did permanent damage with some of its policies from 2020. And the right is saying, you told us to shut up, and you sanctioned us if we didn't shut up. And so that is kind of what you're seeing here in the backlash. In the bigger picture, this flood of activity you're seeing from Trump, when they came in 2017, it was a ragtag bag of misfits. The establishment folks who had run administrations for Republicans in the past didn't want to be in a Trump administration. So it was folks who didn't understand the levers of government, didn't know how it works. And they felt overcome and overpowered by, quote unquote, the deep state, which you may put the CDC as part of it, at least in their mindset. You know, these group of bureaucrats who are left of center and don't feel like they're answerable to executive authority in the White House. So you can kind of begin to see how we got to this point. It's not just CDC. We're going to see this across federal agencies and bureaucracies. So this is just one example, and it's a local one.
You know, again, this is kind of what this new administration is going to be about, where there are so many things to address, right? We've spent time talking about the CDC, and there are at least 100 other things that have occurred over the past, since January 20th, that we haven't gotten to. And there's never going to be enough time to get to just how quickly we are seeing things change. And then the question, I think, is also what happens next, right? So God forbid that something occurs where we need the CDC to communicate, or we need some other entity to step in and help the American public. What happens then? And so, what's the law of physics? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. We don't know yet what will be the impact of this administration just in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, the order puts a pause on regulations, guidance, announcements, press releases, social media posts, and website posts until such communications are approved by a Trump political appointee. So, yeah, this is the direction America is heading.
The thing is, the Trump administration this time came in armed, knowing exactly what they wanted to do. They came in prepared. And, before it was like, they don't know what they're doing. No one is saying that today. They had stuff ready to go.
They had a to-do list. Check, 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 and just going down the line.
They also had Project 2025, right? Which I know there's a lot of conversation during the campaign saying, oh, we are not affiliated with that. But when you actually start to peel back the layers and look at what's happening and what's in Project 2025, there's clear alignment.
That's what it is.
And again,
that's what it is.
So
right.
Yeah. So the question, I think, for Democrats in particular, and then also for, I would say, center-right Republicans, is what is your reaction? What will you do? Will there be any form of checks and balances in this administration? That is not yet clear. And I know, Senate Democrats in particular are trying to figure out a path forward. House Democrats are trying to figure out a way forward. Even Pete Hegseth getting his nomination through. There were 3 Senate Republicans who voted against it. And the far right has said they are going to do everything they can to come after those 3 Republicans.
Which they tried to do over and over again, right? I mean, Murkowski and Collins keep winning. And so whatever, have at. Going after Murkowski and Collins is so stupid because they're the only Republicans who can win at least in Maine. I mean, Murkowski is.
That's right.
She's proven she's resilient. Another Republican could win, not necessarily so in Maine. But spending time going after her when she's proven she can win against far right or challenges from the right, move on. Like she's a vote for the Republican majority. Let's just keep it that way and understand they're not going to be with you on everything. That's how it is. And Mitch McConnell.
But that's not how this administration is going to operate. It's either you are all in with me or you are against me.
Yeah, that's what he is.
I don't know, though. Yeah. I think Trump understands taking out Susan Collins is not good for him. Right? I do think on some level he gets that they have to vote their states, at least in her case. Now, Mitch McConnell, They can threaten him all day long. Well, see, this is it. He's retiring. He's not running again. He's in his 80s. You know, I mean, he can just shoot him the bird from here into infinity, which he may do, right?
I wouldn't be surprised if he did it. That's
what he does, right? But I think McConnell is going to, McConnell is going to be there on most of the Trump agenda because he is very conservative, and even though people hate him for being establishment, he's the most effective Republican leader in the history of our country. Full stop. Full stop. So he's going to be there, but he can also be a vote of conscience in a way that he couldn't when he was the leader. He can go rogue now. He has that freedom, which he hasn't had in 2 decades.
A long time.
Long time. Let me get your opinion or your reaction, both of you, to the rumors, the subtle rumors. I guess they started Friday about the ICE raids here in Atlanta. Weren't sure if they were happening or not, and then got confirmation that they actually were. Another, move by the Trump administration. So what were your thoughts there? Did that happen quickly or no, you were expecting it to happen sooner or later?
I mean, he said on day one, right? He said this throughout the campaign trail. On day one, I will do this. And I think technically they did it on day 2.
I thought he was vacillating some before he took office. I thought he was vacillating a little bit on that, but obviously he was not.
Not when you have Stephen Miller at the helm of that, of that as a policy matter. But I think most folks, regardless of political affiliation, can agree that we don't want violent criminals in the country. I think that's something we can, all agree on. I think we can all agree that there shouldn't be folks here who are a threat to national security. We heard a lot on the campaign trail about MS-13 and, these notorious gangs, which actually started right here in the United States. MS-13 started in the United States. And it started because these were immigrants who fled civil war in El Salvador, and they were trying to protect themselves when they came here from existing gangs in the United States. So, there's going to be a lot of conversation and trepidation, and a lot of folks are scared and not sure what's going to happen over the course of this administration. But I think the difference between Trump and Obama and Bush and Biden is that Trump is vocal about this in a way that Bush, Obama, and Biden were not. And there's a level of just firmness and severity to this conversation under the Trump administration that you didn't see in previous administrations, right? Bush W., there were 2 million deportations under his 2 terms. Obama, almost 3 million people were deported in Obama during Obama's term, which is ironic when you think about, the perception of the Obama presidency. He cracked down hard on immigration. Trump, in term 1, 1.5 million deportations. So about on par with Obama, if you think about what a second term could have looked like if he had gotten reelected in 2020. Now, I think there's a big question about what this does to the American economy. I was watching this clip of a North Dakota dairy farmer who lives just a few miles away from Kristi Noem's farm. So Kristi Noem is a former governor of North Dakota, and she's now the head of the Department of Homeland Security under Trump. And this dairy farmer said, who voted for her and who voted for Trump, said, if they go through with these deportations at the rate that they are talking about, the dairy farms will shut down in 2 days.
Yeah.
So if you think about what this does to the American economy, think about what it feels like when we had a snowstorm and everyone raided the grocery store, right? But imagine that on a regular sunny day when you go to the grocery store and the basic items that you need for your family are not there.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about.
And look, listeners of Political Breakfast know that whereas I may be center-right on many issues, and I believe in pragmatic government and good services, I'm pretty hardcore on the rule of law when it comes to illegal immigration. I think we've had a broken system that has incentivized this crisis that we now have. And what Trump is trying to do is disincentivize people from coming here. at some juncture, the gas is going to run out of the tank on some of these high-profile raids and, shipments back. People are going to see videos of 3-year-olds crying as their parent is taken away. That's going to create a tough political atmosphere. But there's a window of time. There's some runway for Trump to get done a lot of what he promised to get done, and he needs to. We've got to fix this. We've got to send a signal to the rest of the world. You cannot laugh at our justice system and the laws on the books in this country. There is a labor force out there, some of it illegal, in some industries, much of it illegal, that we must have. In Georgia, the poultry industry is one example. Those are jobs where it is hard, it is sometimes dangerous, and it is critical to the quality of life and affordability for American families to produce poultry products. I'm sure that the same is true for producing milk, as Saba said about the dairy farmers. So we need to take that into consideration. The federal government needs to make sure that those industries have time to adjust, maybe to create a process where they can give them work permits so they can stay. Because I think at the end of the day, when you say America first, part of America first is enforcing our immigration laws. That's part of what they are talking about. But it's also about increasing the standard of living and affordability for Americans. And if we deport too much of our workforce at once without a replacement for it, we are going to hurt affordability. We're going to hurt real estate markets if apartments are emptied out. We're going to hurt car dealerships because a lot of those illegal immigrants buy cars in cash, So they are a part of our economy that's already built in, and we've got to be really smart in how we extricate ourselves out of the current condition we're in.
It was a very scary weekend for a lot of people here in Georgia, in wake of all of that. But true, true.
And it's not over.
You and Saba are saying,
yeah, it's not over. My hope for America, for the United States, is that we never are in a place, the folks who listen to this show, who listen to the radio, they are never in a place where they are the refugee seeking asylum. And the United States has been blessed in that regard, right? That is something that Americans have never had to deal with. And I think when you are seeking asylum, when you are leaving your country because it's in financial disrepair or any other significant challenges, political challenges, you don't understand what that's like until you've seen it face to face. And again, I just pray to God that is never the experience in the United States. And I think there's a lot of conversation about moral courage and what it means to build an America for all in this conversation about immigration.
One point that Steve Bannon makes, and Saba mentioned Steve Bannon, and if she's listened to one Steve Bannon show, she's listened to one more than I have. But if you look at the viewpoint that he brings, that's something that I think is pretty widespread in America, but was condemned as racist by the establishment that sort of makes the rules on what you can and can't say in this country, is that culture matters. Culture matters to every group in the entire world. And when there is a massive influx, and during the Biden administration, we had the biggest influx of immigrants into this country in the history of our country, legal and illegal, and 60+% were illegal. There's always going to be a blowback, always going to be a pendulum swing against that in our country and in everyone else's. And that's where I get really angry with liberals is, all these terrible Americans. No country in the world can sustain having 15 to 20% of its population being foreign born. There's always going to be a backlash to it. And it's not that we're evil for feeling that way. Culture, it matters. It matters to happiness. It matters to social cohesion. It matters for identity. All of these things are human, and we need to be able to talk about these things without calling people racist in that conversation.
Yeah, the foundation of America is certainly in question in 2025. On that note, we'll end. Saba, Executive Director of the Atlanta Civic Circle. Always a pleasure having you guesting and sitting in for Theron. Brian Robinson, thank you for your thoughts always, your profound thoughts always. Y'all have a great week, and there's more to come. There's more to come next week for sure.